see if I can get.
Very good.
All right, thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday. I'll tell you what day it is. Whoops.
Hold on.
I got it.
Echo.
Sorry.
So it's Tuesday, May 20th. We are having a pre-budget utility rate workshop. And I'm just gonna turn it over to staff because they're much better at talking than I am.
Sometimes. Well, thank you, commissioners. We thankfully had a lot of rate work that occurred last year and had quite a bit of community outreach, taking a look at and revamping our utility rates, really doing a deep dive, and appreciate all of the time and good questions that you provided for us. We did set rates, and what we want to do now is come back before the budget and before we submit our preliminary budget and talk again about rates. So we kind of feel that there is still some fine tuning to do, and as you know, it's something that is a constant deal. So what's our look ahead for establishing reserves within our independent utility funds? What's our look ahead for future capital needs or some pretty hefty maintenance activities that we need to perform? And what is it that we need to just cover our operating costs? What are we doing to control operating costs? All those fun things. So that's something that as best we can, we try and predict and then make sure that it's not a year to year, but really taking a look at the long term, because nobody likes doing big jumps. And so what Stephanie and Richard and our team have been doing their best to is trying to lay out a path forward so that our rate customers and ourselves can have some predictability about where those rates are going without having some painful jumps. And as you know from the last go around, we were looking at recommending some jumps because that forward looking had not necessarily been followed through over the years. And so that's kind of the impetus of what we're bringing to you today. And if nothing else, what I'd like to walk away with from this workshop is what other additional time you might need and what other questions you might need to have asked and answered to help us submit something that's reasonable when it comes to our preliminary budgets. And so that's kind of the quickie overview. And
We had some pretty big changes last year in how we do rates, right?
yes.
So traditionally, rates were kind of set against CPI, right?
Yep.
So for years, our utilities increased by a percentage that was defined as a certain month for the Seattle Bremerton CPI.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of continued to move forward, and then all of a sudden you had years where you had CPI of 9%, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh gosh, we want to do, so we kind of struggled with the idea of say, okay, we're going to do a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 5. And so we struggled with that idea for a little while. We did implement that on some of our other rate structures, so your parks rate structures are set with that, still referencing the CPI, but there is a min and a max. Then when we really did a deep dive, and thank goodness when we got Stephanie here, we started looking at the utility rates and saying, is this the best way to bill for these utilities, right? I think that with utilities, it's a fee for service, and so those individuals that are utilizing more of the service should pay more of a bill. And the individuals that don't or conserve should get a benefit for conserving. So with our water utilities, we've gone to a consumption based, right? So it is tiered in terms of consumption. We went out and had a bunch of meetings with your ratepayers in these areas, kind of talked them through what the strategy was, gave them a pretty in-depth view of the financial status of their utility, I think some of them were pretty surprised about how much our utilities are subsidized here in Mason County. And some of your smaller utilities, it's just hard when you have such a small base of customers, that any type of expense that you incur has to be distributed over those people, so. So that kinda, I think that we have a year's worth of data associated with consumption, so
About-
maybe
Yeah,
Sure,
for the
almost.
a
water,
good six
yeah.
utilities, yep.
Since the last time that we.
Now that we're live.
Right. How many of these have the meters on them?
All of them.
All of them?
All of the water.
Because I know
Yes.
that there was a person that didn't for a while, so that's awesome.
Yeah, that was one of our number one objectives, was before we start implementing the metered rates, that all users would have a meter, so that it was equitable.
But one of the problems we were having is right before implementation, we still didn't have accurate numbers, and we were getting things that were blown up or numbers that were non-existent. And right before we were doing it, we were getting a few months of data that we were hoping was accurate, because we didn't have enough time to say that they for sure were accurate.
We had 6 months of good data before we went live.
Yes.
When we
On
started
all of them,
sending.
because we were still getting calls from you 2 months before we implementation on, I think it was Russellwood,
We had,
that we didn't have it.
we had customers that had water leaks. And so we were working with them to get the water leaks corrected before we went live. And so we had been sending out high water usage and leak notifications to all customers with high usage for about 6 months. I think we started that in June or July, clear into the last notification before we went live. And so we were working with we were reaching out to those customers actively and letting them know that what their bill was gonna be.
How'd we do in the end? Because I know we had a few of them that were,
Yeah, we had one leak that when we went live, that she fixed it the month that we went live, even though she had been notified, she didn't, I just don't think she associated that we were really gonna go live, and
that's
she
the one
got
we were
it.
talking about?
I think so,
That
yeah.
husband and left the water.
Oh, no, that
No,
was,
no,
That's
that
a-
was,
that's a
that
different
wasn't
one.
that was not a water leak, that was a,
Just left it
Dementia
running.
issue, yeah, I know.
yeah, but we have one that was a leak that was fixed in Beards Cove after we went
Oh,
live.
here's Cove. Okay.
And so, we've got a leak credit,
Yeah.
information to
I
bring.
said the only other issues we had with the meters were, some of them reported, we had to change the truncation of how they
Yeah, but that was
downloaded
long
it, but
before,
that was-
yeah,
was-
that
was-
resolved
that
before.
caused a lot
Probably a
of
year.
confusion as well, but that's been cleared up.
Yeah, that was resolved before we started sending out
Yeah.
letters. We had good data for 6 months before we went live, and then when we went live, we were staying on the same process of, if we have 0 reads, Wendy reaches out and says, hey, we just wanna follow up, and we send staff out to make sure that the meter's working, but making sure people are home, but the high
So,
water usage.
6 months before we went live, but we were doing the adjustments while that was happening, that's the difference. When we were doing our meetings and our stuff like that, we didn't have all those accurate numbers, we were still following stuff through, but we enacted that and then said that it'll go into effect even later.
I think
The rates went into effect in.
January.
January.
Yeah, we held off.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
held off on putting them into place because of some of those things and waiting.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was just probably to allow you guys to have faith that we were following up and doing, following up on any challenges that we had, and we really had very minimal challenges. The challenges were following through with, notifying people that had leaks and saying, this is what your bill's gonna be if this leak's not corrected, and going out there and Richard's staff going out there and verifying the leaks and showing them where the leaks
Yeah.
were if they could.
And
But I haven't had
bottom
any
line,
pictures lately of any of the bad water,
No,
No,
so it looks like we got that.
under
We
control,
went
they
out-
quit producing
Yeah,
it.
Pat, we went out and met with them. The one thing that was clear is we had such a bad coloration and stuff like that system. They were furious, saying before you raise a dime, you ought to give us drink of water. And there was a lot of work that went in to get that done, but I haven't had a picture since.
You sent a scuba diver into the tank.
Clean the tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Problem
thank you
is
for
there's
doing
iron
that.
manganese out in that area, and if you chlorinate it enough, you'll bring it out of
Settle it out.
solution and it forms a solid.
Sure.
So, yeah, and you're chasing a chlorine residual you'll never get to, you'll just produce more solids. So, yeah,
Using
we
the
gotta hold
right
to that.
source is another. We
Yeah.
have
The
different sources,
pictures were
different
amazing.
wells that we could utilize, and one is much higher in iron and manganese, so
So
let's
don't
not
use
even
that one.
introduce it into the system if we don't need to.
Remember, I drank a cup of water while I was there to.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the proof is in the number of calls that either you're receiving
Yeah.
or we're
not.
receiving, and
Yeah, I said, we're not
They're-
receiving, I'm not.
both Richard's team and Stephanie's team have just done an incredible job in communicating, addressing things promptly, and it's really just a handful of customers of questions and concerns, and some are just being super diligent. I mean, some of that is just, all right, I don't wanna pay this next tier on the water bill, so help me understand that.
And you've also equalized the pressure? Russellwood had some serious pressure issues.
Yeah.
We
There's
should-
still
for
some
the most
follow-up
part,
on
yeah.
that.
You know, you see it like, afternoons on a nice day when everybody goes out and uses their water, that's really hard to overcome. I looked into bringing three-phase power over, we had grant money, we could have done that, but we could have afforded to bring the three-phase power over, but then you, of course, would have to change the generator, the pumps, and
Yeah.
every other piece.
What would have been the benefit of that, just out of curiosity?
Different pumps provide higher
Higher
pressure,
pressure.
yeah, more consistent.
It's such a small system there, it's not like we're gonna be able to expand out of it, there's nowhere
No.
else for it to go.
Yeah.
And how many customers on that one?
167.
I think 165, 166.
With a small ability to hook up anybody else,
Yeah.
because there's no
Right.
properties there to hook up.
Right, and that's another thing, is that the Russellwood Water and Sewer, the customer base is the customer base, it's not changing. Beards Cove has a very limited ability to expand, that's
They're
nearly
they're
all
pretty grown out too.
built out as well. There may be a handful,
And
but
both of those
those
systems were not
systems.
ours originally.
Right.
We had to take them, fix them,
Yep.
pay them up, build them up.
Yeah. But as you know, Belfair and North Bay both have quite a bit of capacity. So those are the two that we focus on and think about what expansion looks like and making sure that we're prepared for that as well. So not only maintaining and replacing existing components, but thinking about what needs to be added as the systems grow and our customers grow. The other piece of note on the water systems is that Richard has obtained a quote, and I believe we will have a funding source to be able to go to the fully automated meter reading system, which would be kind of like your PUD where you can see real time. So those customers that are like wanting to monitor every little bit, they will have that ability to do that. So
Yeah.
the pieces are slowly coming together. Stephanie's like, but we hope to be implementing that. We don't want to say when exactly, but we're moving as quickly as we can on that. So that's an exciting piece as well, and I think a great benefit not only to the utility, but most especially to the customers who are monitoring closely.
Yeah. And do you
Yeah.
have one person dedicated to going out and reading the meters at this point?
We do,
Yeah.
it's a once a month operation, and Stephanie and Richard, primarily Stephanie, put together a very detailed step-by-step procedure about this happens on this date and this happens on this, and it all needs to happen very quickly, so that if there are any issues with how the meter's reading, or if there's a potential leak, that our team is addressing it quickly, and I mean quickly, because the next thing is they're generating the bill. So Steph and her team don't want to be generating a bill that they're gonna have to reverse if,
Give somebody a
if
heart attack
possible.
opening up a.
Exactly.
But you,
Yeah.
as she was asking, you do have one specific meter reader?
Yes,
They're sending out for all of them?
So,
yeah, it doesn't, take a great deal of time.
Anthony, one of the operators, goes around and does all the meter reads, in the morning and comes back, does the
It's
radio
just
reads.
drive.
It's
Yeah,
a
he just
wand
drives.
That just drives through.
It's not like
Yeah.
the traditional
community.
ones where you had to go pop open the
Like-
deal and
Right.
read the
Right.
number.
That was
Yeah.
meter reads
Yeah.
for PD, you had to go forward, backward, because that's how they worked.
He just has to
So
be
it
in
did,
proximity and
you
he has to
you literally
drive
put your finger up because you had to go forward, backward to count, because 6 was over here on this one, 6 was over there on this one.
Oh.
Went back and forth between the numbers, because, you know, working on gears. That's why I am old, working on gears.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a calendar, so we have some customers that call in and inquire when, so they would like to go out and look at the reads as a double check on us, and so we have a schedule that Anthony follows. The 20th or the 21st of every month, he depending on the day, goes around and picks those up and then brings them into the office where we upload them, and then we start analyzing the data and looking for high usage or any errors. And so we have about 10 days before statements are run to correct any challenges before anything goes out.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then big picture wise, as far as taking a look at our future large maintenance and capital facilities needs, I'll let Richard elaborate on that, but the CFP is what we know, what's obvious in front of our face today kind of thing, but we have planning efforts underway that will result in more details, particularly in North Bay. So when you see the rate recommendations that include the capital facilities component of the rate, please keep in mind that that is kind of a bare bones at this point, and we expect to see our capital facilities needs increase and have more detail about what those needs are.
Yeah, that's true. It's as bare bones as we can make it. In fact, like welfare, we have, as part of a general sewer plant update effort, we had a fairly new capital facilities or capital facilities plan, and we've stretched that out further than just to make it feasible and palatable to accomplish, not what the engineer would recommend, because he wants to get it done too, but we've not yet, as Loretta said, we're, the last couple of years have been more heavy like planning years, more planning efforts, because North Bay, the capital facilities plan, last time it was updated was a general facility plan, that was 1998. So a lot's happened. We just did a risk analysis there with our engineers. We just performed one at Russell Woods Treatment Plant as well, as part of a permit requirement, but both of those will generate new lists and new recommendations that we'll be bringing those plans to you, because that's something that you're gonna have to agree upon. It's like, we like this direction of these alternatives, as I'm sure you're aware. So we'll have new updated plans for sure. At this moment, what you see is just to keep it running bare bones and not really making strides forward on new technologies or new opportunities to make it more efficient.
Or really just some significant preventative maintenance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we've been operating them until they break, and then we fix them,
Right,
so.
And you got the wiring fixed
yes,
too, at,
yes.
was it Russellwood?
Yes, in Russellwood.
Yeah.
And that was with the grant, which has been a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of help.
yep.
And as you heard not long ago, Ralph was in talking about the new software that he's been implementing. So that's on the operation side. Thank you, Mark, for, I mean, that's very important. That's our
Yeah.
basic, like keep the ball rolling, keep the operation running. And so Ralph's been working with our operators to really fill in that piece of information as well. And we have monthly meetings going over, here's the budget, here's where we are, what do we really need? So it's a Richard, Steph, and Ralph conversation about, all right, what's the balance? And it's been great. We've
Yeah.
had some savings in some areas, and so Ralph can think about recommendations on what are the priorities and how do we use these savings? What else can we do, and start knocking off the list and gain some additional efficiencies. So it's been great, and again, could not do that without Stephanie's historic trends and look ahead and a real-time picture of where we're sitting financially. So it's just been a tremendous help.
Yeah.
So glad we have Steph.
Well, no, it's working with Ralph really, because him getting that software up, he can
Yes.
move from a reactionary to working defensively, meaning that he could start planning some of these routine maintenance items and getting them on a schedule. And also, we can start budgeting them, because we know that the significant components of these facilities have a 10-year cycle or a 5-year cycle, and we can start planning them in the budget. So that's what I'm looking forward to. He's working really hard to get that software up.
And then similar to the roadside, even though, all right, 10 years is the typical lifespan, we're not automatically replacing something just because it's the magic 10 years. There's an assessment about how's it looking. There's a whole assessment about whether a component could or should be rebuilt, as opposed to replacing outright. So there's that goes into it as well. Water and sewer, water not so much, but wastewater components often, as you know, are very specialized. And so we're also in a bit of a box of, we have to replace like, otherwise you're looking at swapping out a bunch of other components so that they all work together. So that's another challenge that we have in the wastewater world.
Sure, just even to get them to fit.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yep. Fun stuff. Fun stuff. So Steph, sorry, we've been yak. Maybe it would be helpful if you could walk through basically what you've put together in the spreadsheet, and then what our database is, our knowledge set, and how that was used to put together some rate options and rate recommendations.
Okay, so let's see if it works.
Make sure you hit the share button. Hopefully, yep, maybe.
So Loretta, I have a simple question.
Sure.
What is MHI?
Median household income.
Okay.
And that's one of so there are a lot of different metrics that we use to check, like is a rate set appropriately, and that is one of the metrics. We want to meet some affordability criteria. We don't want to set a rate that is driving our customers out of or off the system.
And that's fairly common to be used. I know with
Yes.
the Public Works Board, we use the
Yep.
median.
Yeah, and that's actually one of our reference documents. Public Works Board publishes a census-based map, and you can click on a particular area on this map, and it tells you what the median household income is for that census. I know, it's great, it's very helpful.
And I'm not sure that Pat was here, so just the next part of that explanation is how you use that median household income. So for water, 2,
We use a 2%
Yeah.
of median income to come up with a maximum rate that for affordability. So for the water, 2% of the median income for our area, which is $66,325, comes out to about $110.54. So that would be the maximum of what the community should be charged for water. And currently, the base rate for Beards Cove is $44.32, and Russellwood is $55. Then for sewer, it's 2.5%, and that comes out to $138.18. And so then I just compare what each rate and how much capacity we have for each of those rates. So on this spreadsheet, it's even on this.
Band. Or will that be able to?
and then sewer is 2.5.
Yeah, to make it better, to make it larger.
Yes.
Now I killed it.
Oh, oh no. Maybe just
There
grab
you
the
go.
bar and slide it over. There you go.
Okay,
There
I
we go.
could see the correlation, I just didn't know what MHI was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's from an industry trend perspective, it's a common use of kind of gauging where your utility rate is at and whether it's reasonable or not.
Yeah. So, I can start out with, North Bay. North Bay currently, their rate is $120. That was a $4.86 reduction in the previous year rate. With the median household rate, of $138.18. So we have about $18.18 capacity before we would hit that threshold. And so I just run some scenarios. I ran five different scenarios. One of the things that I look at, I'm gonna go ahead and make it a little smaller. I apologize. I've got this here. I look at it. Do these rates cover operation and maintenance? Does it cover a reserve? Does it cover capital? Does it cover a capital reserve buffer? So a lot of times with capital, it isn't just the current year that you're looking at. You're looking at 10 years out. Do I have, one year you might only need 200,000 in capital, but there may be a year you're coming up where you need a significant increase, $1 million or $2 million. And so you want to keep those rates pretty level while you're building that up, and you know that they're coming in the future. So
And the debt service ratio.
in the debt service ratio.
And
So,
so that's important if we ever do need to go out and apply for a loan. That's one of the essential criteria. Do you have an adequate debt service ratio to be able to repay this loan?
correct. So for each of these utilities, I used they're all the same format. So I come in and I prepared 5 different scenarios, where they are on the max rate, how much capacity we have, what percentage of an increase over their current rate, and a note just saying, just basically where it came from. So for the first rate we ran scenarios, we had $124.86. That's bringing it back to the previous year's rate with a max rate of the 138. We have a spreadsheet for each one of them. I need to get rid of this, I apologize. There. So this would be bringing the North Bay rate to 124, an increase of 4.5% to return it back to the 2023 rate. This rate was based on a 2.2 annual increase over. One of the other things that I did look at with all of these was I looked at how the rate had changed as a percentage over 10 years. So over the 10 years,
So a backward look.
I took a backwards look and said, because CPI changes year to year. Some years it's 0.5, some years it's 9.1, and I look at the average increase in the CPI. So Congressional Budget Office, the Fed comes out every year and they're always trying to get to that 2.5. And so when you look at a 10-year trend, you're going to be around that 2.5. When I looked at our 10-year history on the rate, it's a 2.2% increase. So some years when you increase the 0.5 and the 9, overall the rate changed over 10 years, 2.2% a year. One of the things that did change at North Bay in 2024 was that the duplex rate was increased to a 1 ERU. It was no longer a half ERU. So all homes within North Bay now pay a 1 ERU rate. And I looked at any outside capital funding for each of these utilities to cover any capital needs. So any of the grant funding that Richard has in the works is included in these spreadsheets. So one of the things that we did is we have an interest rate on our reserve anywhere between 3.2% and 4%, just being conservative. We have an inflation rate of around 2.2%, 2.3 to 2.4, and that's from the Congressional Business Office, and that's gonna be an annual inflator on all our expenses. I have an inflation rate of 5% for, 5.5% increase for wages and salaries. And I used that, when I went back and looked, we're averaging around 3.7% increase. But as some of these utilities are aging and potentially some growth in the Belfair area, we're, a couple of the utilities may need to bring on additional staff. So I felt that that was a good buffer for the likelihood of bringing on additional staff. And a 7% increase, although is very conservative because we never know how much interest rates are increasing. Those are what I had used as assumptions for building out expenses. So I took this year's budget and projected them out for our operating and maintenance expenditures, and I used Richard's 6-year projection for CIP and put them in each one. And so when we look at the summary of the rates, we're looking at how that rate affects the same assumptions on expenditures.
So, Steph, if we could maybe just
Highlight.
on this spreadsheet here, and commissioners, we're happy to share this if you wanna tinker and play.
Yep.
Or get with us individually about what does this really mean, do a deeper dive on it, glad to do it.
Yep.
But each of those tabs, the red tabs, represent a different rate scenario.
Yep.
But they all have the basis, the same assumptions built into them that Stephanie just highlighted.
So we can see it, and some of them are easier than others. Some of, like North Bay has a significant capital reserve for some expansion and for some capital improvements that are coming along. But I go, there will be others that the rate, when the rate changes, does it cover operations and maintenance, yes or no? May change, same with the debt ratios. So I use the same format for all of these. So on these, I used a rate of 124.86 to bring it back to prior year. All of these across the board were yes, no, yes, no. The only changes you'll see in rates, why would you not choose the lower rate instead of a high rate if they all answer yes or no? It would be doing a deep dive into the 10-year projections. So on some of these, like staff recommendation would be the 130.35. It would be because, and that would be rate number 4. If I jump out to that rate, it's because the 10-year outlook keeps us in the positive. Where maybe on rate 1, the 10-year outlook is not, it takes us out to a no answer for does it meet debt service projection? Does it have a reserve? Are all these things met out 10 years?
So there's,
So it was just taking it out to it, so we've got some projections going out forward and not just looking at it year by year. So that you can keep the rate going pretty static and stable
Without huge fluctuations.
without huge
Right.
fluctuations.
I think the other part of utilities that we need to keep in mind is that you really wanna charge individuals that are utilizing the spread it out over a period of time to the individuals that are benefiting from the system. So when you don't plan for future capital you need to do, then you're placing that burden on future rate players, right? Because now I've had to go out and replace a major pump that maybe cost $60,000. And so if I didn't have a reserve that I'd built up from the individuals that used the original pump, now I'm taking that $60,000 and I'm applying it to customers day forward. Or if the approach of the commission is to go out and find grants to do that, sometimes it's good environment for grants, sometimes there's not. But there's, when a pump goes down, you have to replace it, right? It's not like something we can hold off on.
Correct. And making sure that you have the capacity, but exactly what you were saying, and not not having to scramble for grant opportunities or to come to find other funding sources, so that they can be reliant, and be self-sufficient.
Which our utilities have traditionally relied on real estate excise tax money
Yep.
and .09 funds.
Not North Bay, but we've got,
Yeah, two, Belfair and Russellwood.
Belfair and Russellwood. And so that was one of the other things that we looked at, was trying to move the peg on those utilities, looking at historic, we went back and said, okay, Russellwood's received over $1 million over the last 5 or 6, it was $1 million over 7 years, I've got that built in.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about Russellwood, because I feel like Russellwood is subsidized by the general fund.
It was getting general fund, and it gets
And
62,000.
occasionally,
And
when we
REIT,
had,
yeah.
yes, REIT-type projects that fit the bill.
But the operations
Yes.
Yeah.
but
were
our-
subsidized by the general fund.
And
Correct.
expansions and fixed by the state,
yeah,
Yes,
the monies they brought in, our representatives.
Yes,
yeah,
Yes,
We used direct
Thank
monies for
goodness.
that.
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, they helped a lot.
for project-related items, yes, Randy.
yeah.
The operations, just the cost of operating the utility, that's
Haven't met that.
your general fund.
No, actually,
contribution.
that's not accurate either, because they have given us money for rate reduction, of which we use just for that, in a sense, it covered operations stuff.
Yes,
We called it rate reduction monies. It was
yes,
just their-
rate
So
stabilization.
they
Rate
did
stabilization,
that.
that's what it
That
was,
was
yeah.
money that was brought in
Oh, okay.
from the legislature as well. Gotta give them their props when they did that.
So is that, so,
That was a one-time,
Yeah,
oh, one, okay,
yeah.
but it was $1 million and stuff like that. It
oh,
was-
really?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
so it's, like I said, we gotta give them props, cause,
Oh, they do a great job.
yes, and as I told you, when I talked to Dan Griffey, he's proud of that. And he's willing to go to bat again, yeah, should be. Well, when he went out and met with some of these people, he found that they appreciated it too. Because we let them know, that's always gotta be a part of our responsibility, is to let them know what they've done for us.
Yeah.
If not, it's our fault if they don't pay attention to us, I guess.
Yeah. So I do have it calculated out. So since 2016, in Russellwood Water alone, they've received, let's see, 1.13 million in REIT funds since 2000, and then overall, with even nutrient grants and Russellwood Water System grants, they've received 1.3 since 2016. So that's just looking at the history, just so that, when I'm baking in,
We got grants for meters, we got grants for
Yeah.
quite a few different things.
yeah,
Yeah, we use ARPA funds for some of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
we got 100,000 for ARPA funds in 2024. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but let's go back to North Bay. All right, so but for North Bay, we'll send out these spreadsheets, you can tinker with them, but that's what, I just wanted to point out where some of them, all across the board at North Bay, does it meet operation and maintenance? Yes. Debt ratio? Yes. Subsidy needed? No. Capital reserve, they all met the capital reserve. So when we go through, what are we looking at? We're looking at how it projects out over 10 years. So,
And so that's basically the basis of where staff has highlighted the recommendation. And again, it's purely financial, it's checking the boxes, it's looking at the 10-year trend and smoothing of rates over that 10-year period. And yes, we're meeting the debt ratios, checking all the boxes.
yeah. And we also, and if, additional that I had is it was a 4.4% increase. That was CPI, the CPI rate that North Bay would have gone up at the old rate. So if it was at 124.86, it had been reduced. The 4.4% was the CPI. That would have been the rate this year.
And one of the arguments for the reduction was, of course, theirs is in the best shape, number one. Number two, they always got the brunt of everything because it went up constantly without any check all the way through. So compared to the other utilities, they were more burden than anybody else, and so there was a small correction in order to try and bring that down, but it was a correction that was a decision from the commission.
But that's what, but I go, that was the reasoning on that was just looking at, was looking out the 10-year trend and the capital reserve needs, and to have some data with that. Do we have any questions, or should I move on to the next one?
Keep moving.
All right. We just,
Roll on stuff.
yeah, we're gonna say, don't save and just shut them down.
Just to clarify for myself and the members I'm looking at, when I'm looking at Beards Cove, I'm looking at Russellwood, and I see the current rate, when I'm looking at the current rate for the base, not taking into account the many different things that we have on it.
Correct, I just took it as the base rate, so when I look at the base rate, so we've been monitoring, about 6 months of data, plus since we've gone live 5 months, about 60% of customers are only paying the base rate. 88 to 90% of them are only paying base rate plus the first tier. So it is very, very small percentage that are outside of that. The fourth rate for Russellwood are typically our elite customers or people that are a one-time bump. And we're having to either, we're working on a process to bring to commissioners for allowing a leak credit for those customers that go and fix those leaks, just a one-time credit.
So Pat, to share with you again, my justifications at the time, because I very much am against using rates in order to punish people for them to conserve. I just never been a fan of that type of thing to force them into conservation. But in this situation, we were forcing them into conservation for their costs and the outrageous costs that we were starting to build up on the other side. So it was hopes that this would happen, that we'd do that in order to keep the rate down, not just to force them to not use water. It just happened to be that the use of water is what it was based on. But when I was a port commissioner, I fought so hard to keep from doing it. The state wanted us to implement in order to teach people a lesson. That's not why I was hoping we did this.
Well, I'm not hearing it as forcing them to punish them, to force them to conserve, but it's trying to cover the costs
Yes.
and
Correct.
project out. That
Yeah.
It's not if you're gonna use more, you should pay more. Because you're putting more load on the system.
When I go to the gas tank or to fill up my gas car, my gas tank.
Yeah, secondary part of that would be, yeah, if you conserve more, you pay less.
Right.
Okay, that's a plus, not
I wrote
not a
it.
punishment.
Right.
Yeah. So, the next, should I go to
Sure.
sewer or Belfair? I was gonna go to Russellwood Water, since
It's
we're talking
your
about water.
show.
Okay, so we're going to
Good stuff.
Russellwood Water, cause we were just talking about it. So Russellwood Water, on this one, the same assumptions, the 2%, median household income rate of 110.54 would be the maximum, but we're not even near those. So when I built these assumptions, Russellwood Water, we are now looking at Russellwood Water and Russellwood Sewer as two separate utilities. So I have separated their financials to look at them independently on their financials so that we could get a better look at the specific needs financially for each utility.
So just a quick question.
Yeah.
When they receive their bill, is it on both the water and the sewer is on one bill?
It's one, but they are
they're-
identified separately on the bill.
Okay.
But they pay one fee, it's one check or one payment back. As we go to, we're looking at maybe updating our utility software and looking at separating those out, so.
And they've always been accounted as two separate utilities, but how we've tracked and presented, they've been rolled up as one. So that gives folks a perception that it's only one utility.
Right. Yeah.
I'm only seeing one bill, but we've had to account separate revenues and expenditures because that's what you do with these funds.
As a consumer though, I'd rather get one bill and not two.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And you will continue, but it'll just be broken out so you can clearly say
Yeah.
this component is
Gotcha.
sewer and this component is water.
Yeah.
And then you, especially on the water, can say, all right,
Yeah.
tell me more. Yeah, and again, that was a tremendous amount of work on Stephanie and her team's part to make sure that the expenditures were accurately assigned. Revenues, it was pretty much simple,
Yeah.
right, on the
Yeah.
revenue side, but divvying out the expenditures and making sure that this is a sewer expense, this is a water expense, that can be a little bit more tricky. So they did a great job in allocating that and making sure that was correct.
So on the Russellwood water, one of the things that I had also gone back and looked at all of the rates. So in 2009, I had a county code that started out with Russellwood at a rate of $33. So in 2009, it was $33. In 2024, it's $44.32. So I went back and said that can't be right, and I went back through and said if we had followed code, Mason County code of following the CPI increases, the rate at Russellwood for water would be $79.90. So it was a significant difference from what they're being charged currently. So if
When you're saying following code, what code? I remember we had that code for Beards Cove, I think it was, in Saddleback, and North Bay.
we had
But
codes for all
We didn't have that code
utilities.
for Belfair, and
We
we didn't
had-
have that code for,
We had similar codes for Russellwood, Beards Cove, and North Bay to follow CPI. The old version.
yeah, I'd never heard that in all the years I've been here for
And they
for
referred
Russellwood.
back.
And Russellwood Sewer had followed CPI. It was just Russellwood Water for Russellwood
Whatever
Water
reason.
and Beards Cove had not followed the CPI increases. So that was where I went back through and said, okay, if we had followed the CPI rate, let's see, I've got rate history.
You don't remember that ever being brought to us, do you?
I remember talking about it.
For the other ones, I remember we talked about it for ours, or for the one, for North Bay, we talked about it, cause that was the code, and that's what
I thought it was
we
Russellwood.
had to change the code for that year to allow us not to.
Yeah,
And
I
we've
thought it
never
was
changed it.
Russellwood also.
Yeah, we've never changed the code at all for the other ones, I remember.
Yeah, it
Just-
applied to all of the utilities.
We did with a maximum of,
The CPI.
no, we want way less than the CPI,
Oh,
because it was
a lot
9%.
less
Yeah,
than
CPI.
Yeah.
maximum 5%
Yeah.
is what we
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah, and it applied universally to the funds.
Okay.
So I just took it back to the 2009 and I built a spreadsheet and said, okay, these are the CPI for April, I think it was. And said, okay, if we had followed CPI and built the rate for, yeah, if we had built the rate from there, it would have been $79.90. Which, you know, when I look at other water districts in our area is in line, Belfair Water District. I'll get that to move down here in the bottom. Cannot go back. How do I get rid of this?
It's being slow.
No, it's got a little
Oh,
emblem thing right there and I can't get it to just move. So I can,
get to the next tab.
yeah.
It's being cranky.
Yeah,
It is, it's hiding things.
there we go. Let's see if I can get back to this. There we go. So that's all I did is, Belfair Water District, this year their base rate is $80.65. So that was what I was just looking at comparisons in our area, and that's the first one that comes to mind, but
Would you say that was 88?
$80.65 is the Belfair, base rate, Belfair Water District base rate. So, that was what I was recommending, or staff was recommending the increase to be the CPI, or to be the rate if CPI had been followed. in code. Currently, the current rate is $55. If you had a 10% increase, that would raise the rate to $60.50. I have, there's the in line with Belfair and Shelton rate, which was $80.65. I have a break-even rate just for just a break-even, which would have been $130.36, which is above the 2% median hardship rate. So those were the 5 scenarios that I ran. And you can see they all meet operational reserves for those. If I go to the $60.50, which is a 10% increase, we are still receiving, we have grant subsidies and budget subsidies on those. So on this spreadsheet, we meet O&M. That is the goal. We have to meet our operations and maintenance, but what is the subsidies needed? So at $79.90, we would need about $87,000 a year to make that in 2026 for that to happen. At $60.50, you would need about $120,000 to make that rate work. At $80.65, there would be about $85,000 needed in a subsidy. The break even, there would be no subsidy needed, and that's at $130.36. And at the 110, which is the median, the maximum hardship,
Income.
at 110, you would need $35,000 in estimated subsidy a year to make those rates work. So that's what when the rate, if you go in and play with the rates, it'll tell you about what rate of subsidy you would need to make those rates work.
And the subsidy is including the capital,
Correct.
the projected capital stuff.
Yep. And so each one of these are set up very similar. There's our inflation rate, interest rate, our inflation rates, cost of construction, inflation rate, which I did not include. I think we have an inflator built into the capital facility plan, so I didn't need to build that in there. So wages and benefits were all the same. So then I take 2025's budget and play with those inflation factors and take Richard's capital facility plan that he's got out for 6 years, and I plug those in, and that's where we come, that's how do we meet our capital reserve, has to be greater than 30,000. Do we have a 25% operational reserve? Is that threshold met? Do we have is our capital reserve met? Yes. Do fees cover, fees versus operation and maintenance? So each one of these will show how, it's supposed to show a 0. Our fees should cover our O&M. But for Russellwood, it'll show a negative. How much additional fees would need to come in to make fees cover O&M. So in year 1, there's the $66,000 negative. The fees would not cover O&M. So then that's where we come up with a subsidy be needed, yes. So each one of these have scenarios broke out.
But even with Russellwood Water, I mean, we currently are charging $55. The staff recommendation on this, based on making progress towards covering
Correct.
our costs, is $79.90.
Yep, and that
And
would
that's
just to bring
based
it
on-
back into alignment with what our code, bringing it back into alignment with what the code originally had said,
And the code originally said that it was
to follow CPI.
April Consumer Price Index for goods and services for the Bremerton area.
Yes,
So if we would have increased it by the Bremerton CPI of April every year, then it would be at $79.90.
yeah, it would be, it would be at $79, and so that would be an increase on average of 2.2% per year.
Mark, if you have that on your computer, would you mind sharing that, sending it over to my email, for the Russellwood system?
I think you were gonna send all of them to everybody.
I just meant that particular one, he's got it right in front of him.
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions on Russellwood? Okay, so we'll switch, don't save that one.
And this is where you live, right? You use the Russellwood one. Which one do you use? Yours called?
Allen
Oh,
Water, which is owned by, it's private, yeah, it's
Oh,
privately
yeah.
owned.
What's the amount? Yeah.
Trying to think, but it's not that high per month.
Could you guys find out? How much?
Yeah.
Who was it?
Lakeland's
Richard's
water
got a
system.
rundown of all
Yeah.
of the water and sewers. utilities.
Yeah, we have a whole spreadsheet that we,
Yeah,
we
PU three,
Yep.
Yeah.
we've got quite a few
I'd be curious to see
comparables
those.
of neighboring utilities.
Okay.
Yeah, show, if you got them, show us all of them, because,
Yeah.
some of them are still really low, but they can't sustain that way either.
No.
yeah.
Yeah,
And a lot of.
And we
them-
don't know what kind of system they have.
yeah, that's
And a lot-
the
a lot of
the
them sold out.
danger.
Yeah.
Right.
PUD one ended up purchasing a bunch of them over the last
Yes,
so many years, which is something that I'm gonna mention at the end, even though I was against it for years, we might wanna have a conversation, if we're now at the point where we can hire, then the economy scale may not be as necessary. When I first started, Tim Sheldon wanted to sell off our water systems, but the problem that we had is we were using that for economy of scale with our sewers, so when they're not doing the sewer work, they would be out doing the water work, and if we just cut off the water, now all of a sudden, we just have all these people and not the economy of scale for doing the work. But if we're looking at adding, we might be reaching that economy of scale aspect, and,
For employees.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we might wanna consider getting that off our back, and, but I don't know, that's just the beginning, I just know I was against it back then because of the economy of scale. Now apparently, we've reached it, maybe we should have that conversation at least.
I'm not, convinced we're there yet, but it's, Stephanie's always our forefront, like,
So we're tracking
what
over
are our,
time.
what are our triggers?
Yeah.
When do
Yeah.
we need to start thinking about
So you don't
that?
think
And
we're
so
there yet,
that's-
you're just planning for it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, because if, as Belfair grows and, North Bay grows, as you bring on, more capacity, you have more chances for not failure, but breaks in the
You
system.
have to, there's no free lunch.
Leaks, yeah.
Who
And
knows?
so, yeah, and then you have
People don't chew their
aging
food.
facilities, Belfair is now gone from, it's now a 12, 13-year-old system, it's going from the nice new shiny car to now you've gotta go in and do some major,
I don't know, it's getting back to the shiny
Yes.
car status, I
Right.
think.
yeah. But it's like anything, it goes from new and not having to have those major components replaced or serviced to, you project out, okay, the life cycle for these are 10 to 15 years, and okay, so those are major components that need to be replaced or looked at to be replaced. So you need to have, the staff to be able to do it, or the funding available to do outside, to hire consultants or outside vendors. So I have Beards Cove up next. In Beards Cove, I followed the exact same format. So on this one, I have, if we had followed, the recommendation would bring the rate up to $79.90, which would have been the rate had we followed, had the rate been followed according to code. The next rate was $46.27, which is a 4.4% increase, an estimated CPI increase. I think April just came out just recently, and I think it was 1.7. So the April CPI is what, if I remember correctly, is 1.7%. I start circling that around the 20th of every month.
The difficult part with this is Stephanie's calculating what it would have been if we would have had incremental increases from 2009 forward.
Correct.
Right.
And
We
it,
didn't do that, we can't change that.
correct.
To now go back and try and catch up
Play
in
catch up.
one
Yeah.
year.
Correct. Correct.
Huge jump.
Correct.
Well, we
So
made,
what does that look like moving forward and how do we wanna progress to
Yeah.
that?
we did, and the thing I'm just trying to figure out is, like I said, for me, I've got a great memory of these things, I just don't remember those aspects, but it started in 2009, I don't know when they changed it, because we've agreed with every increase for CPI, every time it's come up to us until it hit that rate of almost 10%, we said, ho, let's look at this a little more. Until then, we never interfered. I can't remember a single time we ever interfered. The only time we ever interfered, but it wasn't covered by that, was Belfair. And for many different reasons, and I'll
Yeah.
explain them when we get to it later, so that you can share with the commission why that happened.
Yeah, and why it was not applied to the water, I have no idea. I'm sorry to say that, but I just have no idea why that was not the case.
And it was only after going through and saying, okay, what was the history of this rate, that I start building it out and go, okay, I don't know why it hadn't been followed, but I just went back and was building it just to find the history of it.
Did you see that it had not been increased for many years, or?
Let's see, rate history.
Because some of those years were very high, would have been very high years, because we served during a part where it was really low, but there were times where that was extremely high, 2008 and stuff like that, I think.
Well, so
But it
that went
was
into
just the
effect
water
2009,
systems,
Yeah.
is when the resolution was passed, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of high
Well,
inflationary
well,
periods where.
But that could have been their reaction, the same as we did.
Sure.
That could have been their reaction during those times.
And I
so-
had been able to follow that
Missed it
CPI
ever
had been
since.
followed after 2018. When I went back and looked at 2018, that hadn't been followed up to that point. But in 2017, 2018, then it started following the CPI rate.
Oh, wow.
So it had,
So 2009 to 2017.
it went to $33 to $36.95.
Wow.
So it had gone up just $3.95 in
That's
almost 10
10%,
years.
you know?
Yeah.
It's high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just digging in, trying to figure out where.
No, I appreciate that, because literally that's been a missed piece.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever said it before, so I appreciate knowing it now. Not that I agree with it. I just-
Yeah. But
Yeah,
the,
we were looking at these beforehand. I sat down with Stephanie and she was showing me her stuff and I'm like, oh, you're brave. Yeah.
well,
This is a numbers, and like Loretta
My
has
job-
said a number of times.
But
this
at
is
the same
numbers.
time, we gotta give you props for that, because the truth is, we had that awakening last year.
Yeah,
You brought us this straight, honest, you know, and we were strong enough to stand on our
Oh,
own feet and
absolutely.
decide what we thought.
my job is to give timely and accurate information to those that make the decisions.
And you did, and it was a lot bigger hit on our psyche the last time than it was this time.
good.
Yeah, we're all going, oh my god. And it's your fault, it's my fault, it's our fault.
No fault, no fault, no fault, it happened.
That's where we're at.
Yeah, we want to avoid it in the future is the
Yes,
thing.
yes.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's our takeaway. We don't want to be setting somebody else up in the
How do you
future.
eat an
for a
elephant one
similar
bite at a
situation.
time?
Correct. And having those honest discussions of, this is where it should have been. I don't make any, these are just recommendations just to follow code. I don't make the decisions, but this is giving 5 different scenarios to work towards where we need to be. So, on all of these, they do the same thing. They all meet the operation and maintenance reserves. They meet their debt ratios. They don't need a subsidy. There is no subsidies needed. Capital reserve. So this is where, Russellwood is an aging system, having those capital reserves in place. One of the things that I talked to Richard about
We're
is
on Beards
about
Cove.
Beards Cove,
Beards, right?
I,
Sorry.
okay, Beards Cove, I apologize. One of the things that I spoke with Richard about was about how many miles of pipe do you have in Beards Cove? Because when you get a grant and they're
So we
looking
know
at,
that they're all bad.
yeah, and if you go out for a grant opportunity, having that 20% matching. So we talked about if he has 5 miles of pipe in the ground and it's about $1 million each, we have $1 million minimum just as a matching for a grant. So to have those reserves above that on top of the regular maintenance part of it is why some of these reserves are so large, is just to be able to cover those capital.
And again, to share, the reason why I share with you, because you weren't here for the history, I just wanna let you know, the problem that, Beards Cove has is the pipe is so, it wasn't ours.
Nope.
They built it, they failed, it ended up being horrible, it was so bad that PUD didn't want it. They only took the gravy and they left us with the worst ones, and we put it back together again. But what happens is, over the years, there's areas where if there's a break and they fix it, when they turn on the water, the new hit of it will blow again. It's old,
Asbestos
AC
cement.
pipe.
yeah.
Yes, asbestos.
AC
And they have
pipe.
to be really careful on
Brittle.
going really slow to open it up, because it literally will bust somewhere else, and it has.
That hammer effect.
Yeah,
And realistically, when you replace it, you just leave it in the ground. The
Yeah.
old stuff, you'll
Yeah.
just, you'll finish new pipe. Leave the old stuff there.
And this is also one of the utilities where we did have a reserve, and it was a forced reserve because we had a loan. There was a loan, and so as part of the USDA loan process, it was required to have a set aside to make sure that there was adequate funds for the loan or the debt repayment.
when we met with the public, they were really angry about, because their water keeps going off. And our response was, you know, we appreciate it, went through the whole history, and then we reminded them, you have one member, Gil, who would love to have it back, if you wanna have it back, you know? And you can replace all these pipes, because they're all gone, it wasn't us. They calmed down a lot when we explained that to them at that meeting, they understood the reality, they weren't happy with it, they still want it for free, but they understood the reality a lot more.
Yeah.
Tough system, but we do great with it though. Let's be honest, we brought it all the way back from collapse to where it services all those people, and now it's almost a max build out.
Yeah. And this is another system. Richard met with our on-call consultant earlier this week. And they're scoping an update to the water system plan itself. That's a requirement that we have so that we can actually apply for grants to pay for the main line, the distribution system replacement. But on top of that, we've got, you know, what about the reservoir? What about replacing a pump in the wells? All of those
Fire
things,
flow and all
so,
that, yeah.
yeah.
Did we ever asphalt it for him? He used to call us once a month to get mad because he wanted that parking area for the reservoir to be asphalted.
Oh.
Remember?
Haven't heard that for a long
Oh, not for a long time, but you just, here,
No,
I jinxed this.
That's all right. That's not.
Well, I think our final response was, yeah, you go right ahead, we'll back you up, you go ahead and ask your community if you wanna pay for it, we'll support you.
have it, or
Yeah, we gave permission.
These rates also include, grant funding of almost $1.6 million over the next 5 or 6 years. And on top of that, I think Richard got an additional, was it $150,000 for the Rochester grant?
Oh, for the
I didn't have that.
AC water pipe plant, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's more like 200,000,
Yeah.
240.
So we don't have anything in hand
No.
for grants.
Correct.
But the intent is to apply for grant funding for that
So there are two
water
loans,
line replacement.
on Beards Cove, right? And it looks like it's
160,
170, or 270 total, somewhere.
That's one of our highest,
But the interest rate on those,
it's one of the highest.
2.75 and 3.13.
Yeah,
Right.
And they are, those two are, well, no, there's one that's a little
Yeah.
higher, but
but had prepayment penalties.
North Bay is the highest interest rate at 3.5.
Mhm.
And that had a high prepayment penalty, that's why we didn't touch it when we went
Yes,
to the
and
banks.
that's a long time before that gets.
and that debt service is a little less than $12,000 a year.
12,000, okay.
So that's what we're looking at. All the assumptions are the same. It's just looking at how each of these rates help the utility build the capital reserve for some of these larger projects going forward.
Any questions with Beards Cove?
Nope.
Okay. And got Russellwood Sewer next.
Which is a bit prettier picture.
I'll say,
And
funny
the
note
water.
to share with Pat, those Russellwood Sewer employees are loved out in that community, don't mess with them. Those people there love them, don't they? What's the name of the guy they had out there for, I loved it, man. Went to a public meeting, basically told us all to shut up, but to listen to him, that guy was, he's gone now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they like Jesus now.
I like Jesus too.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so now we're gonna look at Russellwood sewer rates. So on this one, we looked at, the current rate being charged out at Russellwood Sewer is $118.15 with a median household income rate of $138.18. So we have about $20 in capacity until we get up to that rate. We looked at, if we had followed CPI, again, that rate would have been $134.90. Staff is recommending a rate of $129.97, which is about $8 or is about a $10 increase, a little more than $10 increase. But when we look at all of these things, again, Russellwood is one of those that needs a subsidy. We look at each of these, at each of the rates, at a rate of $134.90, which if we had followed CPI, it would need a $72,000 subsidy, and that would be to cover a $62,000 loan plus some additional funding for O&M. At the rate of $129.97, that is a 10% increase. That would need an $82,000 subsidy. At $156 is the rate we would need to charge to cover O&M, but not the debt service. They would still need to receive $62,000 in subsidy. A break even pulls that rate up to $190 for them to be self-sufficient. And if we build out the $138.18, which is the maximum household income rate, that would be a significant increase of almost, it's $20 a month. So again, we look at the same assumptions and just come down here to the bottom and see at the first rate, we'll go to the second rate, which is what which would be the recommendation, the 129. We come down here to the bottom. Do we need a capital reserve with those subsidies? Yes. How much in fees would we need to bring in to cover the O&M shortfall? About $50,000 a year, starting out. So that's where we're just trying to progress that utility. It's a long ways from break even. Do we have any questions on Russell?
Yeah, I misunderstood. I thought you said the capital reserve would be met at 129.97.
Well, with a subsidy.
Okay.
So at $129.97, we would need to have outside funding of about $82,000.
Such a large system for such a small area. For myself, I'll be honest, it's become to the point, just like watering your plant, every year I water the plant knowing that we can't catch up on that one, and
Yeah.
to catch up is devastating to the people that live there.
Yeah.
But again, it wasn't ours either. Unlike the other two, we didn't build this one, we're responsible when they collapse.
Well, these would make it difficult because you have inflation factors, things that don't change. You have a 5% increase in wages. You have 7% in benefits. You have inflationary costs just for, your typical cost of increase in everything you buy. For
The average CPI over 10 years has only increased 2.2%, and yet our expenditures are going up.
There's only one way
5%.
out of that one, in my opinion, for that, and that is to find a way to allow for a standalone community to be built around it, so there can be expansion into more homes. And it is a waterfront area, there's restrictions, but at the same time, I always believed when I was planning commission, there are options that you can do to fight to allow for certain standalone areas. It already has the infrastructure, it has water, which is a limit, but, and the sewer.
Is
So-
there capacity in your sewer for additional? Because it's right in the middle of it's right in
Yeah.
the middle
It's
of
right
the
on the
community.
water,
Yes.
right? So that's
Yeah.
that's the other scary part about this utility is the potential risk associated with.
Yeah.
You gotta really make sure you're on top of it and maintaining it, cause you're so close to the water that, and your outfall actually
It's
goes
a marine
into.
It's
outfall.
water, it's a marine
Right.
outfall, yep.
Yeah.
But it's the only option for
Oh, yeah.
getting out of it financially. And there's, the lands that are around it are possibilities for this because of how spread out they are.
Do you have capacity in your sewer system?
It's being evaluated at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now that
That's
they're,
a significant I&I, that's what the real issue is.
and now they're putting in less water into the system.
That helps.
Yeah. So just my 2 cents on that one, I think there's a possibility, I don't see us charging our way out of that one.
So when you say significant I and I, do you wanna explain that to me?
Inflow and infiltration, either like through leaky, broken, cracked pipes or, dischargers, maybe hook gutters up to it, or got stormwater funneled to it to
Yep.
relieve their property, that happens all the time. During a rain event, we've seen, I can tell you, lift station 3 at Russellwood will quadruple inflow.
I don't remember us ever doing a smoke test there. Have we ever done a smoke test there?
Nope,
They
that's a
did it-
short one to do it. I mean, like, this is prime time when it's nice and dry.
Maybe we should consider investing a little bit to do that. It had a
We've
huge
got what we
impact on
need.
North Bay.
We own our own equipment.
Do we?
Yeah.
Yeah, it had a huge impact on North Bay and stopping some of that,
Yes.
Yeah.
which
And
is
there
a
are
much larger
still
system though, but
Places in
Oh,
North
yeah.
Bay to tighten up as well.
Yep.
So yeah, you could imagine during a rain event, if it's 3 times, then that's actually
We're right at the limit.
having you have to treat 3 times more, right? I mean,
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the volume of what you're treating is increased so much, just because maybe somebody has their gutters hooked up to the sewer system or storm drainage.
It's weird how our permits work, right? We've got, permit efficiency removal rates. So if my normal flow is this piece of paper coming in and say this corner of it represents the solids I need to remove, that's not so bad. But when I've got 4 more sheets of paper and none of those are solids and all those solids that were here distributed amongst, I still gotta remove 97% of
Yeah.
that. And it's going through 4 times as fast. So it really complicates the issue.
yeah, maybe you can look into that'd be a great project for us to think of and also to go for what it would cost to fix it, to look at different funds and ways to do that, as we're gonna have, in the next year, more funds available for things like that.
Yep. Yeah, we invested in all the materials and equipment to do smoke testing.
It used to be so bad in North Bay that it would crash the bottom. The pressure would be so big that it crashed the bottom and flooded the businesses, and we paid out quite a bit. It just was too much. That night that we were out there at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, all the way through, was because the rain was so heavy, it just crashed everything down below it, and it all had to go somewhere.
Yeah. Pumps can only pump so much.
That's where I met that gentleman you were talking about, great guy.
Yeah,
Didn't understand him very well at the time, but I have the last times I've talked to him.
yeah. Oh, yeah, that's, I got the call. That's,
Yeah.
I joke about it, because he was very excited. And I was like, really late at night, and I was like, what? And I heard him say, Randy, and I was like, on my way.
Because I was out there in it, I was trying to help and do the best I could.
Yeah.
And even my daughter was with me that night.
Yep, yeah,
Was
yeah.
standing in all that poop.
Yeah.
But got it done, took care of them, the community, Cause it was the second time they were willing to kill us.
Yeah, never happened again.
We got it. Good job on all that.
And again, when you go to look through the spreadsheets, there's a tab called the rate history. And so when I go back to 2009, the rate was $88. And so I show what it should have been had we followed CPI. And it followed CPI pretty close up until 2016. And then we had some rate holding and some rate changes. So what would have increased from $88 to $134.90 is at $118.15. So, and that's we had 2 years of the rate being held. So that's what two and a half through this year. So it looks like 3 years of the rate being held. So that's the only reason there was a recommendation to bring it closer to where it should have been for Russellwood. Do we have any questions with Russellwood Sewer? No? Okay, let's save that one. And the last one is Belfair. Let's see. Sorry, these spreadsheets get big and they take a while to come up and down.
That's okay.
I fill my email up, so I've had to start putting them in folders and telling people where the folders are.
That's right, not one of Stephanie's spreadsheets can be emailed.
I always put my backup behind it, like everything that I've used for assumptions, you have or in a tab somewhere. So when you're looking at liabilities or debt service, there's a history of debt service in there. Anything that I've used to create in here, I don't link them, I put them in a tab, which makes the spreadsheet extremely large.
So because these spreadsheets are so large and they're hard to email, do you have them in like the comma drive or?
We do.
Okay. So if you just tell us where to go on
Yep.
those drives, that would be great.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll place one on the iDrive for you commissioners, so you have access to them.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love to tell us where to go. So we're giving you permission.
Well, I live here too, so yeah. All right, so for Belfair Sewer, same thing. I am actually gonna take this one out, I apologize. There we go. Take these out. So on these, I actually have, I actually have 6 different scenarios. One of them was a request I left in there for if if there were no 09 funds used. And so I've got a rate built in if no 09 funds were used in 26.
Yeah, so I'd asked Stephanie to take a look at that. So .09 funds were utilized to subsidize the operational costs that were more than we were bringing in revenues. So not only were we unable to pay the debt service, we were also unable to afford the annual operations of Belfair. So you've traditionally put $800,000 out of REIT 2 to go for debt, and $450,000 a year to go towards rate, or to go towards O&M basically. And so that is, now that we're actually have more customers on Belfair, I was thinking, when do we actually cover our O&M costs, and when can we stop subsidizing through .09 funds?
But we ended up using 09 to also cover some of the debt though.
Yeah, I think it's both. yeah.
Because what happened is
It's over 1.2.
it started at 850,000, then we found we had another balloon, and the next thing you know, that was another 250 or 300,000 all by itself that we didn't know existed, and we started catching up and getting closer and closer on the rate, real close. Because even back in the day, it was only 475 or for the total.
Yeah, the first 3 years, I believe, 3 or 4 years.
The funny thing, it was way before her time or any of their other time. Our staff at the county had never calculated all that. They were so busy looking at a long formula but they didn't sit to look at how much our debt was, how much our operations cost, and how much money we brought in. It was just that simple, but they didn't do that, and then when he did, what was his name? That was
Brian went, oh,
yeah, he sat back and went, oh shit.
got
I'm
sick.
not kidding you, because he hadn't looked at it, he kept trying to do the formula, and we were in trouble right from the beginning. He says, don't worry, Commissioner, we got $1.8 million in the bank, but we got time to figure it out, and then he came to me the next week and said, Commissioner, I got bad news. Apparently, we have a balloon payment. I go, why wouldn't we have a balloon payment? How much? He goes, 1.8 million. We were broke.
And that's common for facilities on startup. They give you a break so that you've got time to build up your customer base, essentially. They know that's gonna be problematic. But we didn't build our customer base as much as we expected in those first 3 years or so.
You got close to $1 million going out towards debt, although we did pay some of that off, so might be a little bit different now, but. And you've been creating a reserve within
Right,
one of your REIT funds, I think it's the REIT 2 fund. And I believe that in 2027, you'll have accumulated enough to pay off your LTGO debt, so your general obligation debt that was issued. If you choose.
So Pat, on this system, the reason why this is so different is it was built out differently, and this would created a big problem for the community there. I remember, what was it, a few years back, I was the only commissioner, even though I represent there, I was the only commissioner that wasn't supportive of keeping it any longer. I had to look at it because I knew we were catching up. What happened was, when they started this, they started it with a certain gallon amount per ERU that nobody else was using. And the amount that we were being charged in the community was so big compared to the surrounding areas that there was no comparison. They were charging, I think it was $98 in Kitsap at the time, and they were getting 2 ERUs for it, for what we were paying for one, but their ERU was 330 gallons per ERU at the time, ours was 155. So when we put on our businesses, it just was a heavy burden. For example, if we increase here 10%, one business alone is gonna pay $3,600 a year difference, because they have 30 plus ERUs. Or residential is not. I think, not this year, but I think we need to start looking at separating the two, so we can keep the businesses still intact and have a residential rate that's more in line with the others. But right now, because they're together, we kinda can't. You help cover the cost of the residential and crush the business. But hopefully we'll look at it, but literally, that difference in gallons made us where we couldn't even compete with a business or anything. Just imagine paying twice as much, 2 big king-size bags of M&Ms, and all they got in Belford was a snack size for the amount that they paid for it. Now, though, it's all caught up, though. We're pretty much equal we're equal with our competitors. We waited long enough, and that's why we held the cost down for 10 years. We waited long enough until the surrounding ones caught up with us, and then it was time to move it up, and that's why I was supportive with moving it up at the time. I got people mad in my community, but it was time. You know, all things were equal and fair now, so now we needed to move up.
so we do have data. Stephanie and Richard and their teams did a deep dive, basically looking at, they collected all of the Belfair water consumption data, and so compared that to what our billing is for our existing commercial customers, and following the code, what would that mean based on water consumption? And so we have something to bring before you that shows recommended changes in bills. So there's some that go up, there's some that go down, but bottom line,
It was like a net change of about 25 ERUs.
yeah, of an increase.
One of the other things that we also did was we had heard, you had mentioned eventually considering moving to 2 rates for residential and commercial. So we spent some time going back through all of our customers, and now we have them designated between their use identified by their tax parcels. So if we've got mixed use, multi-family, commercial, we have them all identified.
Except for we have through there, we do have residential though that are mixed use. They just threw the zoning over the top of the houses when they did it.
Yeah.
They didn't actually
Right.
put anything into that, but just so you know where I'm at on this, I know where I wanna go. I don't know if the commissioners will agree or anything. And I think it's substantial, even though others may not think what I'm saying is substantial. It's, increase, I'd like to separate the two though, because I don't wanna put increase over the increase. But I would love to have this conversation in 6 months about separating them out and having residential versus, and then you can have a second increase on residential, only because it'd be fair. Not because I wanna increase anybody or anything else, but if you live in Belfair and you're residential, you know, you should be comparable to those that are in, Russellwood or Allen. But commercial, until we separate, you can't.
Yeah, and we've got that ability to look at those scenarios. It's again, you know, the pie's this big. So if you're shifting, or if you're wanting to adjust the commercial in some manner that either holds the line or decreases, then that means that burden's going somewhere else.
Well, in my brain, I'm seeing an increase overall because, you know, for this year.
Sure,
Because
sure.
that's what the options are.
Yeah,
I would hope we would, because we're still limiting their gallons. The other don't have a limit on gallons. We don't keep track of their gallons on the residential. So that's why it's so different on these. I'd just separate them out. I want to keep it the same.
gotcha.
That's what they're doing, but yet charge residential a little bit more to be more in line with the rest. That's just my opinion, that's all.
I just wanna, so time check, and then also Steph's battery
Battery's
says
low.
it's running low. So if there's anything that we want to take a look at on the screen battery wise, maybe, we can whip through that quickly.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure what much else, and then other than that, we can kind of wrap up with thoughts and comments and questions and game plan for next session.
Next meeting.
Yeah, next meeting.
Yeah, so our current rate in Belfair is 110.54, with a maximum rate of 138.18 again. We ran through 6 different scenarios. The tabs show the details on these. We ran through the scenario where O&M was covered and a reserve met with no 09s. We came up with a rate of 124.50. We've got a rate where it follows an estimated CPI and it went to 114.41. I didn't update it. It came out last week. It's actually 1.1 or 1.7. We've got a rate that increases 10%. We have a rate that, if CPI had been followed since 2017, would be 129.90. We have a break even with O&M only of 122.50, and a subsidy would be needed, and then the median household rate of the 138. Again, we look at your O&M. How does the rate affect your operation and maintenance? Does it cover your debt ratio? None of them did. Was a subsidy needed? Yes, there is a subsidy needed, the 800,000 minimum for, it's REIT.
That's REIT too.
Yep.
That's for the debt.
For the debt service, and then was a capital reserve met. We wanted to make sure that we had capital reserves because that facility is now 12 years old and switching from a new facility to needing some, going into some maintenance areas. And so we recommended the 122.25, which was the break even with O&M. And we based that on, we've got some grant opportunities, I'm afraid this battery's going out, sorry. I put in and put out. So we've got 3 claim capacity with the city of Bremerton. We put in revenue and expenditures just as a placeholder to put it in, just as a flag, but there was no net effect. It was to track what's going on with the board and what they're discussing, so that when I go to do the budget, if adjustments, it just flags me to remember those. We have some FEMA expenditures for some damage that was done, about $450,000 anticipated to come in hopefully this year. And we just track all of our grants and capital costs that were projected out on the CIP.
And that's a revenue neutral as well.
Yeah.
That's reimbursed, so spend money, reimbursement from FEMA.
Right. Yeah. So we just, each one of these tabs breaks out the different scenarios. Do we have any questions?
Just one more statement to give an idea of the history. It was QFC, they had one in Bremerton, they had one in Belfair. The QFC in Bremerton was $42 per month per ERU, and they had 12 ERUs. In Belfair, it was $98 a month per ERU, and they had 31 ERUs because of a little bit of gallons they were calling it ERU here. That's why it was so devastating. But now Kitsap has changed. There's 20 times since then, and they've become more aligned with what we do, and it's closer. So that's why we were able to start to move up. But you can imagine how devastating that was to those businesses when it was first put on them.
Yeah, and then but we also have the economies of customer base as
Yeah.
well. So there's much smaller customer base
Yeah.
compared to,
No, and I'm
so
not,
those are big.
I'm not worried off
drivers
either of
as
those. I'm just
well.
saying that that's the reality for the business.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And we were able to go back through with the assistance of Dale Webb down at Belfair Water District to get the commercial water usage. And so some of those businesses are
I
gonna
think
be brought
QFC's
forward.
wanted
Right.
Come
Well,
down.
and it's
Yeah,
nice that
that's
they'll allow
all- it
that.
was like
When
when
they
you said
first opened up the sewer, they
Yeah.
hated each other so much that they said F you to the county when they asked for their water numbers. There was a big battle between them at the time, and they wouldn't, they said, we own them, you can't have them. It's like, okay.
Dale Webb has been
Yeah, Dale's really
very,
good.
very good about
Well,
working collaboratively.
Yeah, and some of it is just their ability to
Yeah.
provide that data, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not that they weren't unwilling, it's just,
Oh,
He
during
said-
how do
COVID,
we bundle that up?
they went
How do
through
we
employees
provide
during
it?
COVID, they couldn't
Yeah.
even get us
Yeah.
anything to resemble data.
Yes.
Well, and I just asked him, I said, give me what you can do, and if it's got a tax parcel, he wasn't able to run one report with everything I needed, and I said, give me what you got, and I can merge them together. So I was able to piece them and pull them together, so it was very minimal amount of work for him.
And we've done good for Belfair Water
You're
too,
awesome.
through the ARPA
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
So just remember, we did good for them during the ARPA process. We got their generators and some
We
other
did.
stuff.
We did, plus they got some money from, the legislators, from the state too.
From those guys.
Yeah, those other-
Well, that's our drive-by.
So what are you thinking for the next phase for conversations between us and stuff like that? When are we looking at? What do you
I'm
think?
actually looking at you guys.
Yeah,
for
I
that, right?
am too. What do you think? I already know where I am on all this stuff. I have an idea of what I'd like to see, but it's just my personal opinion after all
I
these
would like
years.
to spend at least a week going through this and then sitting down with you guys, cause you're my SMEs. And then looking at all the information on those other spreadsheets, I think that would be very helpful. I'm sure that Pat would like some time to sit with you
Yeah,
guys
this
and
is,
look
this
at
is,
it.
the highlight.
kind of limited, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the highlight reel there.
That's- Yeah, boiled down. There's
Yes.
a lot to it.
So if you guys could just make sure that we know where the files are.
So thinking about timelines moving forward, would want to definitely get this done sooner rather than later, so that we can plan and communicate with everybody
So
for
what is your
2026.
Well, ideally, she's front-loaded everything for budget. It's just a matter of what do we dump in to our submittal. So that's what, beginning of July, that we need to upload and submit our budgets. So in 2 weeks, we could certainly come back. I hope that 2 weeks would be enough time to take a look at and answer questions on the detailed spreadsheets and maybe have some
Yeah.
sideboard conversations. But really,
To build the presentations to the community, to go out with the outreach like we did last year.
right,
Right.
which
So if we
that,
meet again in 2 weeks, that'll
Okay.
give you enough time to,
yes.
Yeah.
so if you're, and
Yeah, because that gives, if there's still follow through. It gives basically the month of June for commissioners to really feel good about what it is that we're putting in the budget in July.
And then this will be set for a hearing, correct?
So, yes, there would be a hearing, probably, the hearing would be after.
The hearing would
The
be
budget.
set the
Adoption,
rates.
yes, yes,
Yeah, so
And so-
once you get direction from the commission,
right,
and they were all comfortable on how we're gonna move forward with it, then you can actually set the hearing
yeah,
where you would
yep.
present.
Yes, and then so basically from July on, we would identify outreach methods that we would be going out to the community and sharing what's being proposed and what we're baking into the budget and all those good things. More summer
Educational,
meetings,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
That's good?
Okay.
All right. Wow, 20
Thank you.
minutes extra, 15.
Yeah.
I know, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you very much, commissioners.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Great,
Thank you,
great
Stephanie.
presentation. Yeah, so I'd like to, we'll schedule a time and I'll
Perfect.
come out there, cause that'll be easier.
Yeah. I'll send out a link with where all the spreadsheets can be found.
Be great.
All righty.
Alright,
Yeah.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Give me a motion.
It's election.
I move we adjourn.
Just in
We're out
case.
adjourned.
Yeah, if in doubt, yes.
Still calmish.